process as well. So here are some very basic sketches and some very basic notes that I've written down based on my idea of my totem, sort of representing this defensive quality of Yale as an institution, and projecting that into the future. There's an idea of Yale as like this defensive structure. And so Yale as Citadel is kind of like the working title of this little example project that I'm starting to develop. Okay, so I have no idea if I'm going to keep this. I'm just thinking of the structure as a cylinder, and it's kind of like a pie chart. And the pie chart, or each slice of the pie, represents like a department of the university. And so maybe the character goes around this defensive wall on the exterior and starts to see these signs of the departments. So primarily the character will be walking around the perimeter of the structure and just kind of experiencing what's there. This is a plan sketch that shows what the inside of the structure might look like. I'm not going to model the inside, but just to sort of add to the sort of the world building exercises might entail you to come up with some ideas that may not manifest themselves fully into the scene. So like I might have one or two of these like branching corridors accessible in the VR scene, but I certainly won't model this entire city or citadel in any way. And then the idea here is, again, it's a cylinder. You walk the perimeter. The perimeter has like fences and barbed wire and these barricades and these barriers. And so that's maybe how I'm controlling the scene and plan. Right, so it's a cylinder, so I can walk around it. I can never really fully access the interior of it. And on the other side is just the ocean. And it might be the ocean that's sort of inundated into the city of New Haven. And I found some maps in the reference board that starts to do that. Looking at it sectionally, I think I'll have the player start at one of these departments. And, on one side, they'll be faced with defensive wall, and on the other side, they'll be faced with some barricades and evidence of, I don't know, like sort of defensive battles of the past where Yale has had to defend itself from some unknown outside force or influence. Heavy defensive structures like portcullises and these futuristic gates that can drop down and seal the citadel off, and there'll be evidence of like food production, things like that support the city. And so the city becomes, or Yale as a citadel becomes this hyper privatized institution that beyond just offering private education also has to kind of privatize its own food production, energy production, and maybe there will be some evidence of like power plants and things like that. And I'm thinking of these structures in the water, like offshore rigs that grow food or generate energy, solar or wind power. And I might just start to populate my ocean with some of these things and show like giant cables coming back to the citadel, right? It's just initial thoughts. So I'm working with a section essentially, right? So all it is like a vertical wall right now, thinking 300 to 400 feet, but basically 100 plus meters. And then along beach, maybe another 200 or 300 meters to get to the water. But I want to really control how far my character has to go. So I might shrink that or enlarge that depending on what it starts to feel like in VR, right? So I'm basically taking the section, and if we start to look at the blockout model, I'm taking the section, just drawing two basic lines. Then I'm going to revolve that. So I create this cylinder. And then I'm going to start to articulate that using using brutalism as the architectural precedent for how the defensive structure is built. So let's export directly from Rhino. and I'll import this as an STL file into 3ds Max, and then do a Datasmith export of that as well, just to show you the two ways of doing it. And the reason I might want to do 3ds Max is because I might want to populate my scene with other mesh models, or I might want to refine the model and use 3ds Max as my modeling platform of choice. But you can certainly use Rhino for this purpose as well. So I'm going to put it in assets. Makes more sense. So I'm going to create a new folder, Rhino. So we can keep those two separated. So that, well, save. Ports. I might as well open the games and find that project I created. It's called first VR project. Okay. So if you recall, this project, and if you go through the tutorials, suggest you start the project using the VR template. And then if you want to test your scene with a third-person player, third-person character, you can import that in, going to add import and finding it in the features and content pack. We also set our map to be this final project map. And, I think we can just keep using it. And we can import our Datasmith scene through there. And so here we have our Datasmith folder. I'm going to go ahead and click on the Datasmith import button and find the asset that I created from Rhino. So Datasmith, Rhino, and here's our Datasmith project. And I'm going to hit find the proper folder. I may want to create. I did create two folders, so I think I can just put it in that layer, and it should create a folder. It's going to bring in geometry, material, textures, lights, camera animation. It's fine. We don't really have any of those things, but if you had cameras built into it, you could import those as well. Same with lights. I'm going to hit F to find, and so we can see we're now inside of this Citadel structure, which is quite large. I'm going to change my camera speed because now we're operating at a much larger scale. Go out of it. A couple of things. My normals are facing the wrong way, so I can see my ground from below, but not from above. So I might have to flip that. And in fact, a lot of these are facing the opposite direction because we can see it from this side, not on this side. And so let's go back to Rhino. I'm going to select everything. And I'm actually just going to unselect these volumes because these volumes will have normals facing outside because they're capped objects. Let's go back to Unreal. Looks like if I flip these using the flip command, that should take care of it. Okay. Selected. Datasmith. That's what I want. Place that. And then re-import. So now our normals appear properly. Here we are with our blocked out model imported into our Unreal Engine project using Datasmith. I also just moved the assets that I had imported earlier just out onto this outer surface. It was in the middle of the citadel, so I just grabbed all of these elements and moved them out. And I'm just going to start to align these so they're sitting on this ground level. So I'm just going to lower this Humvee a little bit so it intersects the ground a little bit. I'm going to move this totem for the same purpose. Just lower that down. I'm going to grab this totem mesh as well. And just lower it down just to have everything appearing properly. This player would actually just drop down and his collision will interact with the collision on this ground level. And of course, we have our VR pawn, which I might just lift up ever so slightly. And so we have our scene and we're going to want to be able to navigate in our scene in VR. So we just have to do a couple of other things. I'm going to select within my Datasmith blockout scene the sort of plane that was used for the ground level. And when I click on it, we can identify it here in the world outliner. I'm going to right click on it and browse to asset. So then I can find it in my content browser, right? And if I double click on this, what I'm going to do is add a collision, just using its inherent geometry as a collider as well. So right now, there's no collision. So we want to scroll down into the collision section, and we're going to use or check this use complex collision as simple, right? It's going to start out as project default. Just click on the drop down arrow and use complex collision as simple. This will take any geometry that's imported and use that geometry as a collider. So remember, I said collisions are better to simplify just because the computer has to process all of the polygons, but this is just a quick way of just setting the mesh geometry to be the collider as well. So again, just find this collision complexity under the collision category, use complex collision as simple, hit save and close, right? So now we've given this ground surface, this BREP 21, which we browse to a collider. What we're gonna then wanna do is go and grab a nav mesh bounds volume. And we're going to want this to intersect with our ground surface. We can see that once it intersected, it calculated this little green area. If you don't see that green area, it's probably because by default, it's set to not show the navigation. If you click on show, you can see that we can check the box to make navigation visible. all that means is whatever is in green, I can teleport onto, right? I can toggle that on and off with the P key as well, right? And so I want to take my nav mesh and I want to grow it so I can, you know, teleport around a larger area. So I can click on this brush shape and start expanding it in the X and the Y axis. And you can see then the area of green gets larger and larger, right? So let's kind of rise up above the scene a bit so we can so we can move our nav mesh so we can get a little bit closer. Increase the Z-axis as well, because now the bottom of that nav mesh is intersecting. Okay. And so I want to be able to get close to that wall so I can, you know, get a sense for how it feels. But basically, whatever's in green is where I can teleport to, right? Now, if I hit P, I can just turn off the visualization of that. And I should be able to then start my scene. I'm going to focus to this part of the Humvee so I can get back to this, get close to these assets. I'm going to make sure that my VR pawn, after I've selected it, is set to possess player 0, which it is. And so I can then test out the scene in VR. If I click on the drop-down arrow, I want to make sure that I'm using the VR preview, not just the selected viewport. So you'll just maybe see this triangle icon or this play icon without the little VR headset. Just click on this drop-down arrow and click on VR preview. And then you'll be able to preview in VR, right? So now with our VR preview on, I can turn on my devices, so my hand controllers, and if I grab my headset, you can see it's starting to track, right? So I'm not going to put this on. I'm just going to hold my headset and I'm going to raise my controller so you can see that it's tracking. And I'm going to touch the top of the trackpad and you can see like this little string appear. And there's going to be a little ring on the navigable surface. And when I let go, it's going to teleport onto that ring, wherever that ring is pointed, right? So again, I'm just touching on this part of the trackpad and you can see that sort of arc appears like sort of a laser kind of arcing away from the trackpad. And wherever I let go, whenever I let go, wherever the position that ring is on the ground level is where I will then appear. And if I keep doing this, I can make my way closer and closer and closer to my blocked out wall, right? So now I can really get a sense of scale-wise how tall this thing is. And truth be told, it's probably a bit taller than I want it to be. And because it's a cylinder, I'm losing quite a bit of information on the left and right of it. So, you know, by testing this out, I'm able to determine that maybe the cylinder idea is not the way to go, or the cylinder is not the way to go. I'm gonna maybe you know, remake a block out model so that I see more of that these concrete wall surfaces, and it's not so diminished, and it's not so tall, right? So I might reduce the height by half and just sort of have it stretch out so I can see more of the wall when I look to the left and look to the right. Okay, so you know, this is precisely why we want to test these scenes in VR, because until we actually see and feel it, we're not going to know whether or not it's achieving the result that we want. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and remake this block out model. I'm not going to show you that You guys know how to make Rhino models or make models in SketchUp. And then I'll just show you what I did later on. And then we'll re-import that blocked out model in Datasmith, and then test it out again, see if that one works better than the previous one.